Good morning, everybody. My name is Duncan Wood. I'm the director of the Mexico Institute here at the Woodrow Wilson Center. This event will be conducted in Spanish, so I'm going to change language right now, ahorita. Buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to see such a full auditorium today, and this indicates that there is obviously a lot of interest in the topic of Mexico and in this event in particular. This will be the first event in a series of events that we will host at the Wilson Center in partnership with the Inter-American Dialogue. We would like to invite all of the chairs of the political parties in Mexico to come here to speak with a Washington audience. And this partnership between the Inter-American Dialogue and the Wilson Center is very important in my view, because obviously these are two institutions that are fully committed to the concept of dialogue and discussion and to enhance mutual understanding between Mexico and the United States. So first, I wish to thank my friend Michael Shifter, who will be moderating the Q&A session after the speech from our invited guest. And in our two institutions, we have speakers from the entire political spectrum. And we both believe that it is very important to listen to each other, to different points of view, and to be respectful to all of these viewpoints. For this reason, it is vital and crucial to be critical and to also question each other's ideas and concepts. Our institutions, and this space in particular, has witnessed many such conversations. Recently, we did so with Vice President Pence of the United States, who spoke very eloquently about the importance of relations between Mexico and the United States and the friendship between our two countries, and our shared role in promoting development for the entire region, as well as the concept of stability and democracy throughout the region. We should also take a moment to thank the Mexican people for all of the assistance that was sent to Texas after Hurricane Harvey, as well as after the assistance received in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. It is another manifestation of the solidarity the Mexican people feel with the people of the United States. So today we're going to talk about politics and policies, and not just individual personalities. We would like to stress that we will get into the heart of politics and public policy proposals by examining, evaluating, and informing our audience about the viability of these ideas. It is obvious that Mexico matters here in Washington and here in the United States. Mexico is an essential partner for the United States, and I have said this on repeated occasions. The numbers in terms of trade, investment, and spending on security, energy, the border, migration, and foreign policy are all evidence of this. This cooperation extends far beyond our federal governments. Obviously, we should also include our states and municipalities, but it goes even beyond one administration and far beyond government itself. We are societies that live side by side as brothers and sisters. So we are very pleased to have Andrés Manuel López Obrador as our special guest today. He obviously has a very long history. I'm not going to read it, but I just like to mention that he is from Macuspana in Tabasco State. and has played several important roles in his country. On December 5th, 2000, he became the head of the government of Mexico City, the federal district, and was considered to be the second most popular mayor. Twice he's been a candidate for the presidency of Mexico in 2006 and 2011. In 2012, he formed Morena, the Movement for Regeneration of the Nation. In 2012, he also became a candidate for the presidency, and he later announced the withdrawal from the PRD to form Moreno. In November, he was elected president of the National Council of Morena. In 2014, Morena was registered as a national political party. In November 2015, Mr. López Obrador was elected president of the National Executive Committee of Morena, a post that he holds still today. So please help me give a warm round of welcome to Mr. Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you for being here today at this event. And I thank the Wilson Center and the Inter-American Dialogue for this invitation to speak to you in general terms about our platform for our country for 2018 to 2024. If you ask me why we are in this struggle, and as I answer it just standing on one foot, I would say to put an end to corruption. That is what we are fighting for. To put an end to corruption. That summarizes our political platform. There is nothing that has done more damage to Mexico than dishonesty. The dishonesty of the people running our government. This is the main reason that we have social inequality and high rates of crime and violence, amongst other ills that are affecting us. I reiterate, the main problem of Mexico is political corruption. And as I am convinced that this is our main problem, I also maintain that eradicating, putting an end to corruption will allow Mexico to experience a rebirth. It's a simple formula, but an effective one. And above all, it will be transformative. It consists of governing by example, putting an end to corruption, and abolishing impunity, and acting with austerity, and channeling all the money that is saved into funding the development of the country. I clarify that our purpose is to not to reduce corruption or to just keep it in line. Rather, we seek to completely eliminate it. I know that's a polemical position. For this reason, I underscore the fact that it will be a radical measure. Conservatives tend to think that corruption is inherent in the idiosyncrasies of our people. On one occasion, I asked Mr. Peña about this matter, and he answered that corruption is part of the Mexican people's culture. And he must believe that many people share that way of thinking, although very few people dare to say so. For this reason, it is important to point out that corruption essentially has its origins at the top of the pyramid of power and the top of society. And it trickles down. In other words, it comes from the highest spheres of economic and political power, where this is where the values that fortunately do prevail amongst the common people of Mexico. Some skeptics ask, how can we eradicate corruption? They focus on the how. And they also seek to polarize people, but we answer that it's not a matter of laws, but rather political will. There's no law that allows theft. Nor is there any law that allows people to commit crimes. If the president is honest, then the governors will have to be honest. And so it goes down to the last civil servant. We are going to clear corruption out of government from top to bottom, just like sweeping the stairs. And we know that some will say we need some small reform, for example, those geared toward getting rid of immunity and privilege, since the judicial branch and not the executive branch, as now occurs, sanctions and punishes those who commit acts of corruption. Supposedly, our country is in charge of fighting corruption. It then says that the executive branch is in charge of this. In other countries, in virtually all of them, that is a separate, autonomous power. They must also think that we're going to govern with the people and that citizens will have broad participation in this major campaign of raising the morality of the Mexican people. We're going to convene the Mexican people to put honesty first. Honesty should be a way of life and a way of governance. This policy of zero tolerance of corruption will go hand in hand with applying Republican austerity, which will also allow us to free up funds for development. Generally speaking, our proposal is to reorient the budget and reduce current account spending and putting an end to luxury benefits for high people in privileged levels of government, also that we can increase public spending. This is even true when our change will mean that we have greater efficiencies and honesty throughout public administration, but there will be some key projects to ensure that this transformation takes place throughout the country. And I'll just mention a few. We'll go back to the countryside and no longer abandon it and encourage food self-sufficiency. In Mexico, we are going to produce what we eat. We will no longer buy from outside of our country. We will produce what we consume. And if we return to the countryside, this will make it possible for us to make maximum use of our natural resources and knowledge in the country. Currently, in our cities, which occupy 10% of our territory, we have 80% of the population. Meanwhile, in rural areas, which accounts for 90% of our territory, and there is tremendous potential in terms of land, water, flora, fauna, and other wealth. That's where only 20% of the population of Mexico lives. In addition, we will developing the countryside means that we will counteract migration and the breakdown of the family. And we will strengthen healthy lifestyles marked by moral and cultural and spiritual values. The countryside is not only where food is produced, there is a lifestyle there which must be valued again when technical people simplistically decide that you could abandon the countryside with the agricultural development policy, because in a globalized world you can always buy things that you need overseas. They are making a major mistake when they say this. First of all, because that is not true. It is not cheaper to buy from the outside than to produce within our borders. And secondly, this has harmed our social relationships, a very important one. Families have broken down. There has been social decay. And part of the problem of crime and violence that we're experiencing is because we have abandoned the countryside. Our other strategic project will be to use the energy sector as a leverage for development. We will explore and extract gas and petroleum and promote petrochemical refineries. At present, because of the prevailing corruption and not for technical or economic or commercial reasons, we have come to the absurd position of selling crude oil and buying gasoline in increasing quantities and at increasing prices. 800,000 barrels of gasoline are sold to the country every year, while we import 500,000. For the past 40 years, we have just had 6 refineries. The United States has 150 refineries. We sell crude oil and buy back gasoline, and we have to pay a surcharge of some 30% just for freight cost. This is money that could be saved if we refine the gasoline in Mexico. Consequently, we are going to modernize our existing refineries because there is a perverse strategy in place to convert the 6 refineries so that all of the gas can be purchased, to just scrap those refineries. So we need to modernize those 6 refineries rather than scrap them. We have already gone through a reconfiguration and modernization process. in Minatitlan, and in Cadereyta, and in the Ciudad Madera refinery. This has been done with investment along the order of $800 million. But thanks to corruption, those refineries are still there and they do not have capacity to produce gasoline. Those 6 refineries are operating at 38% capacity.
So we are going to modernize the 6 existing refineries and build 2 more. One in Atasta, Campeche, and another in Dos Bocas in the state of Tabasco. Those are very close by where oil is drilled and extracted. And the idea will be to process all of the raw materials and gasoline. The entire energy plan will be supported by research and the implementation of renewable energy projects. I would also like to note that we are going to be modernizing our electricity plants from the National Electricity Commission. This is another important matter, just like the refineries, because we have favored corruption and certain businesses. We've abandoned the public sector's energy generation business. And we've been forced to buy electricity at very high prices with subsidies to private corporations. The idea is to make reductions to the benefit of consumers. The subsidies of those companies that are selling electricity at very high rates to the National Electricity Commission. Our plan is to modernize 63 different hydroelectric plants in the country. None of these are in operation or operating at full capacity. Their turbines are not generating the electricity necessary, and therefore electricity has to be purchased from private companies. We'll continue to respect some of the contracts signed by previous administrations. However, doing so, we will eliminate some of the abuses that have been possible because of complicity between officials, public officials, and the private companies. Our economic policy will be geared toward reactivating productive activities and creating jobs. We will push for regional development with the involvement of the public sector, the private sector, and civil society. We will be planting 1 million hectares of timberland in the country. We will be promoting cattle ranching, fishing, industrial development, and support for small and medium-sized enterprises. We will build a new passenger train service from the northern border and a high-speed train along the Maya route, Cancun, Tulum, Calambún, Palenque. Throughout Mexico, there will be internet service. Only 35% of Mexican territory enjoys access to internet. In Oaxaca, only 3% of Oaxaca has access to an internet signal. In the Isthmus of Guanantepec, we will modernize the Salina Cruz and Catacuas ports. We will build freight rail in that very small but important piece of Mexico. This will allow connections between countries of the Pacific to the east coast of the United States. We will create a trade and industrial area working with the communities of the region. The idea will be to reduce energy costs and tax support so that companies will decide to settle there. This will offer job opportunities, well-paid jobs in the area. And this will be done through the intensive use of labor, 280 different cement roads, paved roads. These will connect some of the municipalities that are off the beaten track in Oaxaca. We will have a broad urban development program, including public services, and will broaden and improve housing in rural areas in the different cities in the country. We will put an end to the strategy of combating violence through the use of force. We are going to put an end to this war. As I was saying, we cannot continue with the same failed strategy. We cannot continue to look at what is going on in Mexico without making changes to the irrational and erroneous strategy that has been in force over the past 10 years. 68 homicides per day. Violence. We had never seen figures like that before in the country. Nor do we hear talk about the root causes. They're trying to put out a fire with more fire. They want to tackle violence with violence, hand to hand, as if it had nothing to do with the lack of economic growth, as if ignoring young people had nothing to do with this unleashing violence. It's this idea of alienation, of wanting to put an end to social unrest through the use of force. And this is something that must change. We are going to end the war, and we are going to seek peace. Peace amongst all Mexicans. This will be our primary concern. We will make it a priority to attack the root causes of violence in Mexico. I contend and believe that peace and tranquility go hand in hand with justice. I believe if there are jobs, if there's economic growth, if there's well-being, if we take into account young people, what we are going to do is bring peace to the country. I restate our commitment to defend free public education, quality education in all school districts. This is something else that's entirely absurd. To abandon education, public education? And take away support for people who want to become better educated and to have better lives? We have seen how every year thousands of young people who want to attend public universities are rejected. They are left out with the lie that they have not passed the entrance exam. The truth is, however, that public universities lack budgets. It is 1,000 times better to have young people in school than to have them on the streets. Education is not a privilege, it is a right. It is people's right. It is the right of citizens. We must ensure the availability of public education. I'm not against private education. If you can pay for private school, that is your right. But the state has the obligation to provide quality and free public education at all levels. We do have to improve the quality of education. However, it is also true, and this is something that's not discussed, to ensure access to education. Coverage. Everyone should have the ability to go to school and to ensure the right to health. This is enshrined in the fourth article of the Constitution, but it's just words. People need to have access to medical care, but only half of Mexicans do. We are going to continue to support senior citizens. We are even pledging to increase pensions, to double them for senior citizens, and ensure that those with disabilities have support. The new democratic government of Mexico will always show respect to the government of the United States of America. We're not going to fight. We're not going to fight with the U.S. government. What we will do is demand our sovereignty, but sovereignty with respect. We will also defend, and this for sure, the right of Mexicans to earn a living in any place in the world through honest work. This is something that President Wilson and President Roosevelt made part of foreign policy. The two of them defended the right to work, human beings' right to work, and to universal fraternity. The 50 consulates, Mexican consulates in the United States in a short period of time will fully take on the defense of Mexicans and migrants in the United States. In practical terms, these consulates will become true centers for the defense of migrants. Mexican consulates and the consuls themselves will be selected using a high deal of rigor. They will have the rank of ambassador. They will have to be as honest and professional. The consul in Los Angeles as Mexico's ambassador to France. I repeat, we will seek bilateral relations with the United States that is focused on cooperation for development. We will defend migrants. At the same time, we will implement economic policy to ensure jobs and to guarantee Mexicans work and stability in their places of origin, where their families, customs, and culture are in place. We are going to push for regional development in Mexico, again, from north to south, with projects to keep people in place so that it can remain in their communities by promoting work and well-being. Along the entire U.S.-Mexican border, we will create a free trade area to promote investment and productive development, technological development, and job creation. This is the last barrier and the last way for us to keep workers on our side of the border. The more than 3,000 miles of border, if we had and a 20-mile wide strip, we will have tax incentives. We will lower VAT from 16 to 8% throughout that entire border area. And income tax will be lowered to 20%. We will reduce fuel costs, electricity costs, and again, in that strip, that area, wages will go up. This is a sovereign decision that we will share at the appropriate time with the government of the U.S. The migrants will be able to choose to decide on the Mexican side of the border with the protection of the Mexican government, or to return to their countries of origin, where they will enjoy the right to work at fair wages. My friends, we are currently working on our 2018-2024 national plan. We have 200 specialists working on this platform. They are broken up into different sectors and areas. Most of these specialists are from academia, they're intellectuals, they're from the business community, they're social leaders. They're independent. None of them are major members of parties. We have Alfonso Romo Garza, who has joined me here on November 20th in Mexico's National Congress. The Morena party will present the national plan. This is a document that we will distribute to each and every one of you. I would once again like to express my thanks to the Wilson Center for the invitation. This is my second time here. I would like to thank you very much for the invitation. I would also like to thank the Inter-American Dialogue. Thank you very much to each and every one of you. Thank you very much, Mr. López Obrador, for your words. I believe all of those of us here found them interesting. We would like to thank you for coming to Washington to share your ideas, your vision for Mexico in the future. And this is obviously something we're all interested in. Before beginning our conversation, I too would like to express my thanks to Duncan Wood and all of the Wilson Center staff. We are very pleased to be able to work together. We're hoping that other Mexican presidential candidates will come join us in future events. We are very, very pleased with this partnership and the cooperation. I know this will be a very fruitful discussion. If you'll allow me, Mr. López Obrador, I would like to ask some questions in order to begin our dialogue. I am sure that many of you would like to ask questions as well. I hope we will have time for that. If you are elected President of Mexico, you would be the first candidate who doesn't represent either the PRI or the PAN parties. That, in and of itself, would be historic. In order to achieve this Mexican Renaissance through these profound changes you're proposing, you will have to work with other parties, with the PRI, with the PAN, and their representatives in Congress. How do you envision working with these parties who may not be as committed to the changes you wish to make so that you are going to be able to implement the reforms you believe are necessary? It's a matter of persuading them. What are you thinking in order to make into a reality all of these ideas that inspire you? First, I would like to remind you that these are joint elections. The president is elected, as are the members of Congress. This will be on July 1st of next year. We are going to have candidates for both the presidency and in the Chamber of Deputies and the Senate. Our hope is to win a majority. We hope the citizens as a whole will support us and support our vision. We hope to have a majority in Congress in order to be able to better implement our platform. Should that not be the outcome, and we were to win the presidency but not the majority in Congress, then we have to seek allies. However, not everything has to be based on reforms. I contend that we already have a legal framework in place, and have for many years. When there's political will to have an honest government, when the ultimate objective is development, to create jobs for people, the laws we have are fine. The problem is they are not enforced. This is where we call what is porfiriato, from Porfirio Diaz, where they respected the form of the laws but violated the substance, and that continues to be the way things work. We have the laws that exist are fine. As long as we enforce them, we will be able to move forward. The reforms, which are not many, that are needed, will be submitted to Congress, and we will persuade them without bribes. We're going to do this legitimately in order to achieve this, because we've seen corruption take root in Congress. To approve some of these structural reforms, what they do is allocate to each member of Congress a budget. And you know very well that the legislative branch does not execute the budget. So why should they be managing the budget? So things like sports, and the construction of roads, culture, each member of Congress is given a budget, and what they do is they go and they meet with mayors and governors and they negotiate those funds. They provide those to the mayors or the governors. They come to arrangements and they get a bit of a tip, a commission. Well, or we call them moches, which are, for all intents and purposes, bribes. They may recommend the construction company. This is all so that they get the vote. So we are not going to let that happen. We will have a relationship based on respect with the legislative branch, but without corruption. No corruption in between. I believe we'll come to an understanding. We're always going to be proposing to Congress something that is for the common good. Can you repeat all of that? No, I'm just kidding. As to the relationship with the United States, Mexico, as you know, as we all know here, has a little bit been at the eye of the storm here, the political storm in Washington. You recently stated that NAFTA would have to be renegotiated after the elections. So US, Mexico, Canada. But could you go into detail about why you've made that suggestion? How do you think the current administration in Mexico has been handling this major challenge thrown at it from Washington? There's been a major shift, at least at the rhetorical level. What would you have done differently given this very drastic change in attitude? This is something we were discussing before we came in here. It was a mistake for us to get involved in your domestic elections. That is something we should not have done. Gotten involved in a US presidential election. It was very sad to see that the highest levels of government and the economy took sides. The governor of the Bank of Mexico, on the eve of the election, stating that if Donald Trump won, there was going to be a level 5 hurricane, category 5 hurricane, imagine. But that's not what happened. But I do think it was a mistake to get involved. We should have acted with more restraint. They wanted to make some of the campaign speeches into food for our campaigns, and I think that's a mistake. I think it was important to make very clear what our position was, having heard that rhetoric, and not allow Mexico to be degraded like that. That was not proper treatment, not during the campaign, and even when the government took office. Two decision. One, insisting on the building of the wall, and even worse, this agreement to go after migrants in the country. The Mexican government should have spoke out immediately. And international organizations like the UN should have made a formal statement on the violation of migrants' rights. This was not done. We've seen other unfortunate and ugly episodes. That phone call between President Trump and President Peña, that was really unfortunate.
We believe that we need to establish a relationship of respect expressing a desire for cooperation and setting aside propaganda, because that is not serious. To say, I'm going to build a wall and you're going to have to pay for it and wait for applause from certain sectors. Just doing this to exploit nationalist sentiment that exists in all peoples does not sound serious to me. And saying we're going to impose a 30% tariff on the border, forgetting the fact that we have a necessary relationship, and if you impose this tariff and don't take proper care of our trade relations, just to give you an example, for the United States citizens, it would cost them more to buy new cars. And if we were to punish the Mexican automobile industry or Mexican auto parts industry, that would cost, consumers would have to pay a big price tag for that in the United States. How can they compete? How can U.S. companies compete if Mexico trades with Asia and Europe? And all of these points need to be raised. And there needs to be a very respectful discussion to point this out to President Trump and to point out all of these things, discuss them, and establish a respectful relationship because of geopolitics, because of our border, and because of our friendly relationship, and because for the sake of our cultures we need to come to an understanding. We are not going to wager our bets on having any break in relations. We have to remain aware of the diversity of trade that we need to have with our main economic and trading partner. Our main economic and trading partner is the United States, and we are well aware of that. We need to find a way to reach an understanding, cooperation for development. We have all of these projects. No walls and no use of force. Development, jobs. The problem of drug trafficking, for example. This needs to be addressed together and not by just laying the responsibility at Mexico's feet. We don't want to have more deaths in our country. And so this problem needs to be addressed from the demand side in terms of consumption in the United States, and we should not mix things up. To this end, there is no campaign to call on young people and the people in general to stop using drugs. There should be an all-out media campaign spreading information. The media is not a branch of government. In Mexico and the United States, we wake up in the morning and we go to the internet and social networks and watch TV or hear the radio. Why can't we reach an agreement just amongst our governments, but our societies and our people as well should try to strengthen our values and confront the problem of drug addiction, reduce drug use, that is to say, get at the root causes. If there continues to be drug use and demand, then our border is going to be vulnerable. This isn't a problem that you solve just by building walls. I repeat, we need to look at the causes. We need to answer it with development, employment, strengthening values, and not rely so much on the use of force. Why not reduce the military budget and transfer those funds into social development in the United States? And also addressing the problem of our young people. That's what I believe in. That is the kind of dialogue we would like to have. Not talk about walls and militarizing the border. No. That will not solve anything. That's just propaganda. It's not serious. And we hope that there will be understanding. We have to say no to racism and xenophobia. This is a large country, a very large and extraordinary country. And it is special because it has migrants from all over the world. And that is how the United States should be. It should not close its doors. It should not become a ghetto. That would be absurd. Those are all of the things that we would like to discuss when the opportunity arises. Thank you. You've spoken a lot this morning about corruption, which is a topic that's important throughout the region. There are elections coming up in Brazil and Colombia, and there is also going to be important discussion about this as well. But there is one specific topic that I think, in order to be more transparent and publicize information, well, journalists have a very important role to play in this. This year in Mexico, 10 journalists have been killed in Mexico this year. What do you think can be done to protect journalists? Beyond development, you've talked about development, those are long-term things, but I'm talking about journalists who are investigating organized crime and corruption. This is an urgent matter. Is there something that could be done to address this problem of killing of journalists or protection of journalists, to protect them further? Yes, of course. We could safeguard their security and look for the most appropriate strategy or mechanism for protecting them so that they can not be attacked. We condemn all of those killings of journalists. All that I would like to say is that you have to address the immediate problem, but you have to think of the structure. It always seems that to us, if you look at the root causes and make sure that there's growth and employment and development and take care of young people and you have education, these are always more long term. And people say, yes, 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 that's all fine. But what are you going to do tomorrow and the next day? So, of course, tomorrow and the next day, we are going to act. We will work and persevere and work in coordinated fashion. There is no coordination in terms of attacking crime. Right now, I was the mayor of Mexico City, and every day at 6 a.m., even Saturdays and Sundays, I met with our security cabinet, the Secretary of Gobernación and Public Security, and the prosecutor, and I got a report of the crimes committed over the previous 24 years, and we made some decisions. That's what we're going to do, something along those lines. I myself am going to show up to handle this matter and demand coordination. However, the essential approach has to be attacking the root causes. In terms of protection for journalists, of course, we will afford such protection. And we are going to make sure that there is no corruption in the police forces. There are also other problems that have originated in corruption. There are places where the police is controlled by criminal gangs, and there are also government authorities that are controlled by criminal groups. They've affected our values, such as a bad example of making money just to make money and profit for profit's sake. So in order to win an election, you get some money from these criminal organizations. And then a governor or mayor comes into office, and they have to leave the criminal operations alone. And they have to put it in the hands of the Secretary of Security, in the hands of the criminal groups. So there are some things that do need to be done immediately the next day. We have to very clearly establish the line between government authorities and criminals. You can't have the same personnel. You can't blur those boundaries. So for us, we commit to ensure protection for journalists. Duncan, did you have a question? Yes, thank you, Michael. Mr. López Obrador, you spoke a lot about the energy sector during your remarks, which is an essential sector for the prosperity of Mexico. After to 2013-2014 energy reform process in Mexico, many private Mexican companies and foreign ones have invested billions of dollars in the energy sector. We now have two new impressive discoveries in the Gulf of Mexico, partially due to those investments. However, you have said that if you are elected president, you'd like to look at this reform, or at least ask the Mexican people about this energy reform. And I think that that's a very interesting strategy. Obviously, the Constitution of Mexico says that there can only be public consultation on energy reform in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, and that you need to work hand in hand with the National Electoral Institute and the Supreme Court. Perhaps you could share with us your thoughts on the success of the reform thus far and what process you would undertake with a referendum or public consultation with the Mexican people. I do not agree that a lot of investment has come to Mexico due to the structural reform, and in particular due to energy reform. That is part of their publicity, that billions, about billions of dollars. Nor is it completely true that those investments are responsible for the discovery of new oil deposits. That is simply the opinion of those who are defending the reform. But reality is different. Such investment has not come, and production is falling off. We produced in 2004 3.4 billion barrels a day. 3.4 billion a day. And now we are producing or extracting 2 billion. But the investments take 5 to 7 years to yield fruit. Yes, however, they are not yet drilling. It's just an ad campaign. If you look at the facts, you will see that above all you need honesty, seriousness. If you look at what was said by government officials and what the Secretary of Energy said before the energy reform process, they were saying that there was immediately going to be an increase in investment as well as in production. You might remember those forecasts. You see that that does not reflect what is actually happening in Mexico. It was a lie. We have a serious problem because we are now extracting the same amount that our country consumes, with the aggravating factor that oil can't even be processed in Mexico. We have to buy back gasoline. So there was a complete drop in production, and there is a serious crisis in the Mexican Petroleum Institute in Tabasco and Campeche. There are companies that are going bankrupt, so this is very much contrary to the official line. We are going to intervene because we do not want to be left without any oil production. And we need to slow down this drop in production. Otherwise, we will have to buy crude. And we don't want that. So we are going to intervene quickly and we'll review the contracts. I know that some people don't like to hear that. They would like us to say that everything will remain as it is. That cannot be. For, among other reasons, because I do not trust the people who signed those contracts on behalf of Mexico. In other words, we don't want to be caught by surprise with the bad experience of finding that the contracts with the oil companies are like the Odebrecht contracts. That's why we're going to review them. I don't think that it's in anyone's interest for us to continue to have a relationship between the public and private sector that is characterized by corruption. We do not want to have this. In Mexico, there is going to be opportunity for private investment and foreign investment, but in an atmosphere of honesty and with full respect for the law. We will have an authentic rule of law. It is shameful for us to see things like the Odebrecht situation occurring. Here in the United States, this is acknowledged and there's greater care in terms of public works contracting and for goods and services. It is unfortunate that this Odebrecht situation is being heard in the U.S. courts here in the United States, and this is true in many other cases. So we are going to review this. We're not going to act arbitrarily. We are going to respect the law, but we are going to review contracts. This is because we don't want to have contracts that are framed by corruption or contracts that completely set aside the Mexican people, our citizens. The relationship with Pemex needs to be publicly negotiated. These are public service countries for the Mexican people, and we need to watch out for that. It's not a matter of ideology. It is not a political matter. It is a matter of practical judgment. The nation of Mexico cannot lose in this. We cannot allow corruption to continue, and we cannot allow just one party to benefit from a property that belongs to the people of Mexico, to our entire nation. We will review these contracts. Okay, time is running short, but I would like to offer the floor to the people who have been very patient in our audience, awaiting an opportunity. Perhaps we can take a couple of questions from the audience. Tolia, would you like to start? Tolia? Please use a microphone. There's a microphone here. And please bring a microphone to this row. Please identify yourself and be extremely concise because we have very little time. Hello, good morning. I'm Idolia. I'm a journalist from Mexico. I have a question for the candidate, Mr. López Obrador. We have been seeing how foreigners are meddling in elections. Specifically, I'm thinking of the Russians. It has been more than proven that they did interfere in the elections in the United States. So I'd like to know to what degree you or your party is concerned about any interference by the United States in the presidential election next year, even more so since it's known that the current administration, the Trump administration, has talked about this with Chavez and Maduro and other forces that they deem to be antagonistic to the interests of the United States. Thank you. Professor Ivanko? Please pass the microphone. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Andrés Manuel López Obrador. You recently said, yes, I'm José Miguel Vivanco from Human Rights Watch. You recently said that in terms of persecution of Mexican immigrants in the United States, the Mexican government should go to the United States to report such abuse. And I believe that that is right. Unfortunately, this was not done. However, the idea of going to the United States to protect human rights is based on the fact that human rights are universal and there are no borders across which such rights can be violated. So I'd like to learn about your position regarding the human rights situation that a Latin American country, in the Latin American country of Venezuela, in which there are accusations of serious violations of human rights. And there's a report by the High Commissioner that indicates that there has been massive and systematic violation of human rights. Thank you, Jose Miguel. Thank you, Rafael Castillo, the Venezuelan American Leadership Council. Mr. López Obrador, you recently said that as regards the self-determination of peoples, but you also point out the government of Donald Trump. You criticized the Trump administration, but not the Venezuelan administration. You talk about putting an end to corruption. That's the same reason that Chavez ran for office in '99, but he wound up having one of the most corrupt administrations in the world. So my question is why you have not criticized the Venezuelan government if you believe that corruption is the biggest problem faced in Mexico. Yes, please. Yes, last questions from the Voice of America, Veronica Paredes Iglesias, and I'd like to hear your reaction to the Trump administration's recently announced decision regarding DACA. Yes, Jesus Esquivel from El Proceso, a newspaper or magazine. You said that your number one priority is to put an end to corruption. I would like to hear what you think if you get elected president, what you would do about the prosecutor of the nation who wants to impose something on the Attorney General to make it legally impossible to replace him. Everyone says that this would perpetuate corruption in the Peña administration, and you're saying that there would not be any witch hunt if you come into the presidency. But I wonder if rather than a witch hunt, there is a great demand for justice. We see what happened with the former governor of Veracruz, and we see that impunity continues to be spread. Please, come to the point. What would you do if Raúl Cervantes is imposed as the Attorney General of Mexico? Well, Idolia, I was saying that no foreign government should intervene in Mexico's elections. And if this were to occur, we would report it. But it's not going to go very well for them because our people do not want any foreign government to meddle in affairs that are the exclusive business of the Mexican people. I don't think that that would help the opposition. It may even harm them. And we would also denounce any such interference. As regards Venezuela, I had two questions about Venezuela. We maintain a respectful relationship and we would not like to get involved. We have said that there should be dialogue in Venezuela and there should be mediation. And I have proposed the intercession of Pope Francis in that country. They need to reach an agreement. They need to find a solution through dialogue. I was just in El Salvador. What the Salvadoran people managed to do after so many years of confrontation and death was really extraordinary. There were murders of campesinos, workers, business owners, priests, nuns, journalists, and even Monsignor Romero in the middle of saying Mass. He was murdered. But they, the Salvadoran people, were able to reach an agreement and they signed a peace accord, and they still have problems, but they're overcoming their differences without resorting to political violence.
It is my hope that in the case of Venezuela and the Venezuelan people, that reconciliation is sought. That, not violence, not conflict. Because nothing is ever solved that way. I am spearheading a social movement in Mexico. For several years, we've been denouncing corruption in the Mexican government. They stole the presidency away from us. And I believe that happened twice. The first time, undoubtedly. And I have proof thereof. Not one shard of glass was broken. Nobody was sacrificed. Nonviolence works, and dialogue work. The idea is not to eliminate your adversary. We shouldn't look at our rivals as enemies who need to be destroyed. We simply need to win. It's not about polarization. The inter-American dialogue, that's what it does. That's what they seek to do. It's all about seeking dialogue. I have no ties whatsoever to the Venezuelan government. There's a lot of politicking going on in this whole situation. I think it's very unfortunate that even President Peña Nieto, in his remarks, has tried to inspire fear, saying, oh, if López Obrador wins, Mexico is going to become Venezuela. It's like he's acting like the head of a gang rather than a head of state. I'm not going to say more. I've already said it in the plaza. But I have to respect the administration in place. I believe we need to seek the best path forward. I will always believe that that is dialogue, 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 dialogue. Of course, I oppose the violation of human rights. I am fully against incarcerating the political or social opposition. I do not believe that is the correct path, nor is it a way to solve problems. I do not support that. Politics was invented to avoid confrontation. We have to engage in politics and we have to engage in dialogue. As to the Attorney General of the nation, it is my hope that the current Attorney General's candidacy is withdrawn because it does not enjoy consensus. There have been protests from different sectors in the country regarding that appointment. If there's no moral authority in the person who would take on that position, then they can't be of use to Mexico. I would sound a call for the withdrawal of that candidacy and to have a true judge, man or woman, an exemplary citizen, somebody who is honest and forthright, so that the PGR can become an autonomous and independent body. If not, this could prompt, with a majority in Congress, an amendment of the law and the removal of the Attorney General. Well, the speaker is not using a microphone. I do not agree, and I say so very respectfully. I have no interest in getting involved. I believe opportunities must be given to youth. We have to encourage talent, promote it through the development of science, technology, knowledge, not close the borders. I am sure, I know that in the US, among other very admirable traits, there truly is balance, a counterweight amongst the branches of government. I feel very confident that the US Congress will make the right decision about this DACA decision. This is one of the advantages that the US has had for a long time now. The media, there's freedom of speech and expression, and they question the leadership. US judges and democracy in the US begins at the grassroots. Judges are elected. I think that is a very important tradition in the culture of legality. I don't think it's surprising. Well, Hidalgo was murdered in Chihuahua. Juárez. Ciudad Juárez, which was known as the pathway to the north, to El Paso, Texas. And the revolution began from the US side. Many revolutionaries, the Flores Marron, were taking on the Mexico from the US side. Because what happened? If they were detained here, they would appear before judges and they could be released. In Mexico, if they were detained under Porfirio Diaz, it was the what we call the fleeing law. They would simply vanish. So this is an admirable side of the United States. It's the checks and balances amongst the different branches of government. The executive branch is not the branch to end all branches, as it were, with all the power. The legislative branch holds very important weight. I do hope that the DACA decision is amended, resolved, and that anyone can come here. The scientists, who were immigrants, have made great contributions to the United States. There's a huge percentage of US scientists who have come from other parts of the world. This country has developed thanks to immigration, and this is something that we should not forget. If the US Congress decides it supports the closing of the doors to innovators, very soon Mexico's doors will open to all the young people who want to move forward in science and technology and knowledge. The doors are open in Mexico. Thank you very much. We apologize that we've gone and beyond our allotted time. On behalf of Duncan, the Wilson Center, and the Inter-American Dialogue, we would like to thank you, Mr. López Obrador, for having shared your time with us. This has been an excellent encounter. We will be following very closely your campaign, and we hope to continue this dialogue. Thank you very much to the Inter-American Dialogue, the Wilson Center. Thank you to you. I wanted to acknowledge the presence of a friend and compatriot who has helped us and be here this morning at the Inter-American Dialogue. It's Lázaro Cárdenas. Thank you very much to you, Lázaro.